So last week we talked about a lot of films, a lot of things we've done. Again, we're in legacy mode. We're in the vaults, the archive. We left off at episode 248, the death of Roger Ebert, and this week we began with the death of Bob Crane. Paul Schrader's Autofocus, episode 249. Interesting to end one episode with, in this whole process of looking back at what we've done, we're doing the death of someone who looked at films to describe them. And then we began with this kind of, we didn't know it at the time, but we're in December of 2019, and there's a lot of ominous shit about to happen. And here we are looking at someone who was on TV, but who was obsessed with and interested in documenting his sexcapades, and was ultimately murdered with a fucking tripod. Interesting.
Fascinating. I mean, when you it's all very salacious, and in the hands of a different director it might have been opportunistic, gratuitous. It might have been just like a very badly handled look into the life of this actor, this nothing actor, really. I mean, Bob Crane really didn't have that much of a. He didn't really leave that much of a stamp on the medium as a whole. He's forgettable in a lot of respects, but the story behind the story, and with Paul Schrader's, with Schrader's output up until this point, and what he's done, what he has created, it really does fit into the world of difficult sexuality and problematic men. While at the same time painting this strange picture of the end of one era and the beginning of another era. This kind of movement into free love out of the 1950s, out of that whole tied down, very Americana type of characterization into kind
It's a beaver shit.
Yeah, exactly. The Ozzie and Harriet family, good father, beautiful wife doing housework in pearls and high heels, and the adventures of their two kids versus
and
the dog, yeah, versus the emergence of a counterculture. And one of the strangest television shows ever put on television, Hogan's Heroes, an adaptation, somewhat of an adaptation of Billy Wilder's Stalag 17, but basically a television sitcom about a German prisoner of war camp. I mean, just that alone makes you think of the Holocaust. It makes you think of it. I mean, it's a very strange film. It's a very strange time. But then Schrader's look at that, the movement into free love, the emergence of video equipment, and how all of one man's sexual appetite, his sexual appetite, would ultimately be his undoing. I think it's really one of Schrader's most underrated films. It's really well done. A surprisingly good performance from what's the guy's name? Greg Kinnear. Who before that was a host of Talk Soup, that ETV. I don't even know what the fuck it was. I just remember it was on E, and it was clips of talk shows and shit like that he would make his snarky little comments on. his performance as well as Willem Dafoe in. I mean, where do you really rank the John Carpenter performance in the pantheon of his creepy characters? Where does his character fall? He's played creepy so many fucking times in so many
Willem
different
Dafoe.
variations. Yeah, Willem Dafoe.
Because you said John Carpenter.
That's the character he plays.
Oh yeah, because
Do you remember?
because the guy has the
hmm
same name as the director. Yeah,
Very strange,
right.
huh? Yeah, you remember
It
that?
gave it a weird. Yeah, right. Yes,
I'm sure John Carpenter
I
wasn't too thrilled about that.
right. The guy who's basically who people think killed him, but like there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe is that guy. Willem Dafoe is great at that. And there's an episode there just for that, just for the creepiness of Willem Dafoe and his filmography. And it's kind of like, well, find one where he isn't weird and creepy.
There's only one, The Florida Project. And it's weird because he carries such
Is that with the
baggage.
girl?
Yeah, that's the one with the little girl. And carries such baggage because you keep thinking, is he a pedophile? Is he a pervert? Is he no? Oh my God! Willem Dafoe is playing just a regular nice guy who's trying to do the right thing. What a fucking asshole I am for hoisting
Right.
all this shit on Willem Dafoe, who's doing nothing but
That's
trying to be
great
nice.
casting, though.
Oh yeah,
Flip it.
it is. It's great. He's wonderful in it. Yeah.
From there, we ended out the year with a kind of a comparison and contrast between Goodfellas and Casino. So more Scorsese to end out that year.
I think it's a question that people who know movies have asked a number of times. It's that, which is the better film? I think in my heart, Goodfellas is the better film, but Casino is kind of slighted because it comes after Goodfellas. I mean, it's basically the very easiest description is to say it's the same as Goodfellas, only on a much bigger scale. You know, where Goodfellas is street level hoods hustling and existing in that violent world and committing acts that in a lot of time are heinous and difficult to accept. Casino amps that up, and it's like it really is. Goodfellas is a coked out Goodfellas. Casino is what's worse than coke? I don't know. It's coked up Goodfellas. It's kind of crazy. I think just the level of it's gaudy, it's ugly in a lot of respects, but it is Vegas, and Vegas is all of that. I'm not a fan of Vegas. I really don't like the city. I think we've talked about this in the past, and you like certain elements of it, if I recall. But
I like the history of it.
mhm.
I like the history of it. It's not my favorite place. I've been there not many times, but I've been there
times, yeah.
enough times.
Yeah.
And I've it's one of those places that it's kind of like either you're into it or you're not, kind of thing. It strikes me as one of those places. There's a difference between the Strip and downtown, like the old part of Las Vegas.
Yeah.
There is something interesting about, if you know about Vegas, you know about Bugsy Siegel. There's that. There's like Binions and all like the history of like the World Series of Poker and Doyle Brunson and all these like poker guys and and the days of Texas Hold'em, and how there's a history of like when poker was illegal and all this shit, and it was backroom guys mostly from Texas, and then all of the politics and all of the scamming and all this stuff to create this kind of tournament, this tournament of poker. That's cool. It's always interesting to think about fucking like sex and crime and prostitutes and murder and all this shit that is happening there. And so there's a sleaziness to it, but it's also the bright lights and passing over on a plane. It's fucking interesting to just see like it's black desert and then this thing like in the center of nowhere. But then it's also like you get there and it's fucking hot as fuck. It's ugly. It's like big and ugly, and there's all these fucking people, and I'm not into those games. You know what I mean? So I don't really I don't go to do that. I've gone to just if there was a reason to go, and I typically met up with people that a lot of times I went on the Greyhound. And I would just meet up with if it would be a group of like from theater people, it would be like, okay, but I would like go on the Greyhound on my own. And that's it. I just fucking eat, drink, and just kind of like walk around and kind of watch other people enjoy it for what it's supposed to be, which is like, and see some shows. Some Cirque du Soleil is cool. But that's that. Seeing the behind the scenes aspect of Vegas is cooler. It's cooler to watch fucking Casino from that aspect than or Hard Eight. Like that's a movie that I would like to do at some point to really go into like this is business and how does this work? That is more interesting than I want to go fucking party in Vegas at some fucking like overpriced club where I don't like the music. And you know what I mean?
That's a big part of it. It's like I don't like Vegas and I don't like the people that go to Vegas. But I agree with you in the sense that the stories behind Vegas.
Yeah.
The fact that there are holes dug in that desert is interesting as all hell. And each one of those holes has a story. So I think that's part of the thing with Scorsese. Scorsese really knows that world, and it's amazing to me that he continues to be able to mine so much out of these stories. And but don't get me wrong. I do not want to join the list of assholes who think that Scorsese is only a mob director, because he's not. He's so much more than simply a mob director. The mob films are what? 5? Irishman, Mean Streets, Goodfellas, this one, and what else? That's basically it, right?
What was the first one you said? Did you say The Irishman?
The Irishman, Mean Streets, Goodfellas, Casino, and elements of Raging Bull, but for the most part,
and also elements of The Departed. I mean,
The Departed, yeah.
I mean, not elements. It is mob film.
It is. It's not Italian gangsters. So
it's not right. Yeah. But I mean, that's one aspect, but that's kind of like how he gets painted.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I'm saying, is that I don't like the fact that he gets painted as simply a director of violence and mob films or mob violence, when the man has violence in a number of other areas of his filmmaking. But he's a very nuanced filmmaker, and he does things that are I don't know that there's a genre that he has done. I don't know that there's a genre that he hasn't done at this point. You know, Killers of the Flower
That's an
Moon
interesting question.
is a western, yeah, and this is what he's
Has he
done.
done science fiction?
No, he's never done science fiction. Science fiction is probably the only he's done somewhat noir. He's done noir to a degree. Um, Psychological dramas, fucking Cape Fear. You can call a horror film if you want. Um, he's done romances. He's done religious films. He's done a children's film. I mean, he's a very nuanced, very uh, he goes across the board. He's done a lot of different types of films, and I appreciate the wealth of what he's done. So, but it's hard to look at Casino. It's hard to look at Casino and not think about Goodfellas. And in Goodfellas,
Right.
you watch Goodfellas, you know. So, I think it's an unfair comparison, but it's impossible to see it without comparing. It's a much better film than it gets the credit for being. Is I guess the point that I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because the comparison diminishes the film.
Hmm.
So we finished 2019 with that. We started 2020 with some hardcore cinema, with some it was Orson Welles' uh, Citizen Kane paired with Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. So the
Yeah,
idea of perspective and memory, what we do, what we're
that's some.
doing now.
Yeah, that's something that I want to go back to, comparing two seemingly disparate films and showing the way they converge on universal truths and human truths. Um, a lot of people wouldn't be able to see the similarities between Kurosawa and Wells, but I think these two films really exemplify the 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 fragility of honesty in the human memory and being able to tell a story, whether it's to tell a story to serve to serve a narrative. And I'm talking about a personal narrative, not a film, not a cinematic narrative. I'm talking about um, Charles Foster Kane creating his own mythology, but also the Mifune Bandit, the samurai noble, his wife, and the peasants, all telling a story and tweaking it to the degree to make themselves look better in each retelling. In some cases, to as in Mifune's Bandit, to amplify his toughness. The wife's retelling of a story to show her victimization, but her anger in both anger and victimization. The the husband's spirit trying to save face even in the afterlife. Um, Two incredible films that share a lot more than that share a great deal more than you would initially imagine upon viewing them. I think we should do more of those kinds of episodes. That would be that would be fun.
I agree. Yeah. From there, we went into the presumably, but not really the end of like Star Wars. It's the meaning of endings, right?
Well, you know
Episode
what?
9.
I think there is a chance that it might be an end to that element of the Star Wars story told that way, and I think it's very interesting because um, if you go to Disney Plus, which I had for about 5 minutes,
Hmm.
what you get are a series of television shows based on. Oh, excuse me. What you get are a series of television shows based on Lucasfilm creations. So I don't know if we're going to go and see. I don't know if we will see another Star Wars movie anytime soon. It might be cyclical and
So
everything old becomes new again and we'll go back to those movies. But
sure.
I don't know what there's a show on right now called The Acolyte, I think, They've
Right.
done the
Yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi series, the Boba Fett series, the Mandalorian. Rosario Dawson had a series for, maybe that's the Acolyte. I don't remember, but no, they're not going to. They didn't pay so many billions of dollars to let the Star Wars universe lay dormant. They're going to be going
Hmm.
back to it numerous times. But with the changing face of movie watching, will it be a movie going event? That I'm not sure of.
Or it's just going to become part of the household fucking thing. It's like
Hmm.
the latest version of the furniture, which is going to be in our living room, which is
Yeah,
whatever the new Star Wars thing is. Yeah.
sure. That's very possible.
I mean, that makes sense.
Hmm.
They would like, it's that. And see, and the thing is that, yes, that's that dominant, but at the same time, doesn't that diminish, doesn't that diminish Star Wars? Because it's kind of like it's too present.
It
It's relevant
diminishes.
supposedly, but it's so relevant it's irrelevant.
The problem is that it only diminishes it to people like you and I who remember what it was like to see the movies in theaters. It's like it's comparing generations.
Right.
When I
Yeah.
talk to people at
Right.
work, yeah, when I talk to 20-year-olds at
The
work,
paradigm.
yeah, exactly. When I talk to 20-year-olds at work, I'm talking to somebody. If I'm talking to a 23-year-old, I'm talking to somebody who has never known life without the internet. Um, and most of their conscious life, I'm talking past toddler age, past when you can actually formulate thoughts and create, where you start creating your narrative. These are people that had cell phones, smartphones, not even just
Hmm.
cell phones, smartphones. So I think it's a different world that we're living in at this
Yeah.
point, and that only becomes a factor for people like us, like you and I, who have a nostalgia aspect to it. I mean,
Yeah.
even,
I mean, that's a great point.
yeah, I mean, even with us, it's like we didn't grow up in the movie houses. We didn't grow up in the movie palaces. We grew up in the multiplexes. Can you imagine somebody coming from those 1,000 seat movie theaters and having to watch a movie in a 250 seat theater with this small screen and the sound of the movie next door to you bleeding into whatever you're watching?
Yeah.
It's a completely different thing, and it's but like, if you never grew up with that, I was fortunate enough. You and I were both fortunate enough to go to the ArcLight, to go to the Egyptian, um, to go to Grauman's Chinese Theater to see these palaces. Um, that's just not the norm anymore. So it's the cinematic experience is a constantly evolving one, and something is lost in the translation. Something is lost in the evolution. Um, yeah, the Star Wars thing, it's evolving into something completely different than what you and I both knew so many years
Yeah.
ago. But you got to
Yeah.
remember, it's
I
been
mean,
50 years, you know? Yeah.
that's a good point. That it's like having to like come to terms with that. It's like, am I just taking that for granted? That because that's just from the perspective of like, well, that's that old paradigm where it's kind
Yeah.
of like the idea of even the idea of like a Greta Garbo, which
Hmm.
I mean that even that itself is a fucking like who, um,
Yeah.
where it's kind of like that kind of supply and demand, kind of like mysterious kind of product or personality or whatever, where it's like where someone isn't oversaturated, there's value to that because that idea of like, well, scarcity means value, right?
Yeah.
Versus like today, it's kind of like you have to fucking stay relevant. You have to be out there every day, every day, every day. If you're not posting, if you're not doing this, if you're not doing stories, if you're not shaking your tits like like 3 times a day, or or if you're not tweeting about fucking make America great again, like whatever it is, something else is going to come up. So it's like fighting for attention. So it's like, how does all of this work? And so, yeah, like, that's something that Star Wars is in kind of marketing speak or whatever. It's kind of like, yeah, they made that pivot, right?
Yeah.
So that they're able to stay relevant, right? Versus, I mean, it's weird because it's kind of like, well, The Godfather is something that's timeless and eternal. But The Godfather is timeless and eternal to a point, because it's kind of like you see people on wearing a Godfather shirt, but it's kind of like, have you seen that movie? No, I haven't seen it. You see people wearing a Nirvana shirt where it's like, okay, supposedly, yes, it's one of those things where it's like Nirvana is timeless and eternal. Obviously, they can't produce any more shit because that ship sailed fucking decades ago, right? But it's kind of like you see people wearing a Nirvana shirt. It's like, do you listen to that music? And at best, you may say, at best, obviously, it's like, yeah. Then the next best is like, well, my parents liked it, you know, when they were kids. Or else it's like, no, I just like the shirt.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like,
yeah. I saw a kid wearing a Ramones shirt yesterday actually, and I was just like, I think there's a good 90% chance, 75% chance that this kid has never heard the Ramones ever. You know, I mean,
absolutely.
It's just, what's that? But it's a cool shirt. Why wouldn't you want to wear it? Oh, it's sad.
Right. Right. I mean, we grew up with like, don't be a fucking poser, asshole.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, if you don't listen to it, don't fucking rock it. That's a different thing. And at this point, like, of the original Ramones, like the last one that died fucking 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's that's crazy, you know? So we are getting old. From there, we did a compare and contrast to Clouseau's Wages of Fear,
mm-hmm.
compared with Freak and Sorcerer, and I thought that was fucking like that was cool. And so we're doing like some really cinematic shit in early 2020. Not that the other stuff isn't, but it was just kind of like, you know, you start off with Kurosawa and Wells, and you're doing Sorcerer, and it was go watch those films if you haven't seen, and listen to the episode 253. But go watch Freak and Sorcerer, the troubled making of, the story of that, all of it. You did an episode remembering Terry Jones.
Mm-hmm.
We did Casablanca,
mm-hmm.
episode 255. Casablanca is one of those that's like AFI all the time. Like, is this the best film of all time? It's always fighting it. We did the 92nd Academy Awards, which I don't remember, like, if any of that was, like, compared to what's to come, it's kind of like, who cares at this point? We did A Woman Under the Influence, a film that you keep talking about.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep talking about that movie. Every once in a while you get something that speaks
that's a
truth.
Performance that's just going to keep, Kirk Douglas died in February, or we did the episode in February.
Mm-hmm.
We did an episode that kind of really like underscores the differences between our approach to, I guess, just in general our approach. Mm-hmm. And it's an art film. It's the Turin Horse, and I think it's kind of representative of kind of like things that we disagree on.
Yeah.
What we expect from a film, how we approach a film, how we relate to films. and how we also comment on films. So you were coming from a place of like, yeah, no, this thing is a failure type of thing, and I'm just like, first of all, like, failure is maybe not the right word. You're expecting something else. This is the film that we're looking at. Blah blah blah. It's an art film, and it's very stylized. Not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
Very probably, and not even the most, but he's a divisive director. So it's an interesting. Those kind of films and those kind of directors are interesting because it's kind of like, where do you, as a person, when you watch this film, where do you stand? You know what I mean? Like, where does this put you? Because it's gonna give you a reaction. It's not gonna be one of those like, oh well, you know, like it's gonna be either like, oh shit, this is beautiful, but, or it's gonna be like, it was this but that, or it's gonna be like, this movie's the shit, or it's gonna be like, I fucking hated that movie. It was too long. It was too repetitious. It was too this. It was too depressing. It was too blah blah. So it's one of those that's really like kind of very it places you somewhere in the landscape of film watcher, and I like those kind of films because they provoke. So the Trojan horse is kind of one that we always go back to in terms of like, as an example of arguments or disagreements or whatever.
But I also found that with Tarkovsky, you have slow moving, repetitious, and seemingly inaccessible, but that works. So I mean, it was there was a lot more to it than just that, I guess. I mean, a great deal of it is the purpose of film, and I argue that, and I still argue that all of that you say is relevant, and yet the film still has to entertain to a degree. There has to be something that hits you on a spiritual level, and that's the harder thing to understand, because with something like Stalker, I can't tell you exactly why it is that film resonates with me, but what I can say is that the poetics of the film are really what drive you to, or at least drive me to want to continue investing, to want to continue watching, and to wonder what the next minute's going to be like, what the next half hour is going to be like. You take something like Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's not simply that the film is beautiful to look at, or that they're doing so many, at the time, incredible special effects. There's a visceral connection to the humanity of the film and what it's saying about us. And I still argue to this day that nobody really understands what that fucking movie is about, because I'm not sure that Kubrick understood what the movie was about. There was a poetic there was a poetry to the image that sometimes just allows you to be engulfed by it. And that's the work of Malick with The Tree of Life, with Kubrick 2001, with and Tarkovsky with Stalker. But it's also something that is missing from Bellatar's The Turin Horse. But according to me, but also it's like I'm curious as to what's the other film that he did. He
did a bunch of films, but the big one, the most big one is Satantango, which at that point is a 30-year-old film.
Yeah.
And if this one was like rubbed you the wrong way, that one's gonna fucking like
Not necessarily. Not necessarily
it's a
because,
5 hour fucking film.
but not
And
necessarily because, look, I hated Solaris. I really didn't like Solaris, but I loved Stalker. I still go back to that one. So it's there is the possibility that I will hate Satan Tango, but it's not a guarantee. If
of
the
course,
images
but
work, you know what I mean?
I just don't think that and this is a we're gonna relitigate this to death, but it's like I don't think for the most part you're as into or open to or interested in so-called art films, and especially foreign films that maybe aren't. And I'm not saying that you did. I'm not completely trying to put you in a box, but especially like if it's a foreign film and it's not Italian or Japanese, like for the most part, it's the or Hong Kong, the kind of grammar and worldview and perspective, it turns you off, and you're not really an art film person. Um,
Yeah, I
and
don't think that's
so
true, but
I think it is because you have the expectations of a standard narrative film with a standard narrative character arc, because a lot of the complaints that you pose are based around that format. So
yeah, when they don't offer elements to fill in the gaps in the way that Kubrick does, or with Tarkovsky, or even Jodorowsky. There's if the image is good enough and the performances are interesting and there's something up there that is captivating, then the narrative doesn't necessarily have to sell it. But it really depends on how powerful the image is. I mean, I do subscribe to the idea of the cinema as image, and a silent film being the most the purest form of cinema. If you can do it that way with just the image, you know, you're a great filmmaker. I don't see that with
that's
with Bellatar's film. Now, that's not to say that Sada Tango, the stakes might be higher. It might be greater. There might be more emotion to it. I'd have to see the film in order to say yes or no.
I mean that's yeah. I mean that's up for grabs. But
Hmm.
I don't think that it's going to be your cup of tea.
It probably won't, but that doesn't mean it. That doesn't mean that that's definitive.
For sure. Um, I just I think those of us even listening, I think like it's kind of like yeah, nah,
Maybe.
it's like we know you, Rick.
Hmm.
Um, so then things changed.
Hmm.
Um, we we met up in March of 2020, and there were rumblings. Um, and so we said, "Hey, all this shit's going on. Like, there's something happening. Let's do Contagion and Outbreak. Let's pair these films. Steven Soderbergh and Wolfgang Petersen's films about pandemics." And I went to your place in South Pasadena, South Pass, and I remember we were talking about it, and I was like, "Well, it's a fucking pandemic," and you were like, "Is it?" And I'm like, "The World Health Organization is calling it because it's already this thing is like traveling." Um, and that's the last time I fucking saw you in person. I've
Wow.
only seen you once. I've seen you once in October. No, in February I saw you um, because I had an engagement party and I saw you
On
I
the phone.
FaceTime
Yeah.
for like 5 minutes. And and I have not seen you since. I have not seen the face of Rick Ramos, but for one time
Well, I'll tell you, we're
since.
both older and fucking grayer. That much is true. There's
Well,
there's there's bigger
that
lines under those
time,
eyes, baby.
my mustache turned white in that
Yeah,
year.
I noticed that.
Um, so it's like, and I mean, I don't wear a mustache, but like, if I were to wear a mustache, it would be a white mustache. Now, um, but it was like we went into it's Outbreak is more ridiculous.
Yeah.
Great cast, but more ridiculous.
Mhm.
Contagion is more more realistic and more like kind of more systematic in the way that it shows the the virus like spreading. Um, and so here we were like, oh, this sounds fucking like appropriate, but without really having, because we don't know. It's like having this fucking being super relevant, but at the same time, it was like, fuck, we don't know, because the following week we were gonna meet up to do an episode on the death of on Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that there was all this fucking pandemic shopping, well, panic shopping. There was all this uncertainty around me in my life. There was personal tragedy unrelated to the pandemic. And so it was like, well, it wasn't even an idea of like, well, let's not hang out yet necessarily. It was just more like, I can't because all this shit is happening. We're going to go buy toilet paper and fucking water and all this shit.
I remember that,
and
standing in the lines. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, bags of rice and whatever else, because it's like everyone is fucking doing this, so we have to get what we can. And then it became an issue of like, well, what the fuck is this? And then then it was like, and that's from a perspective of like, because people are still kind of, what the fuck is going on? And then people started to slowly develop their perspective on, you know, you want to talk about Rashomon and fucking
Mm-hmm.
and that it's kind of like, is this shit even real? Not I was never. I'm like, people were dying. People knew people who were dying. It was, you know, parents of a certain age, like family living with people, and it's kind of like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, this is now, how do, in other countries, people are doing, it's this big experiment, right? But then here in this country, it's like, all right, we focus on individual freedom. The culture is so focused on that. How do you, uh, how do you pair? How do you reconcile? How do you reconcile personal freedom with this idea of like, yeah, at this point, like the collective good when you have a contagious disease? We're still learning about this, and then it became politicized. So it was like, well, then it became this fucking left-right issue where it's kind of like, particularly it was the right that was like, is this even real? Or is it China's fault? Was it made in a fucking lab or leaked out of a lab? And we're gonna blame physicians, and we're gonna fucking attack experts. And now Fauci is a fucking war criminal under that fucking mindset, supposedly. And it's kind of like, whoa, like, and masks become muzzles. And it's like, I'm not going to wear a fucking mask this shit's not even fucking real. But then it's like, well, if it is real, it's their fault. But then if you fucking take this anti-parasitic drug that for fucking that one version of it is for fucking cattle, but for humans it's for lice, and supposedly that like without any real like published findings, like that or ivermectin and all this other shit, and then Joe Rogan's doing his thing, and then Neil Young's like, fuck Joe Rogan, so fuck Spotify, and it just got crazier and crazier, and then people, then it's like the workplace, people getting sick in the workplace, and it's like a lot of people started going to remote work, and we stopped fucking doing the podcast in person. And I know some people were doing podcasts. They started doing them from across the room, or they did them at these longer tables, or they did like different things. We quickly resolved to figure out a way to do it the way we still do it to this fucking day, which is to do it over the phone. So you did Kurosawa's Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it was kind of like, what do we do? We fucking, we went into, we did 12 Monkeys and La Jetée. And we kind of moved into this kind of like dystopian kind of place as a reflection of the times. And from there, we went into Train to Busan, Zombies.
What's interesting to me is that I didn't realize that we had gone for so long doing the show in LA without being face to face, because this is March and I wouldn't leave until middle of May. So we recorded for 2.5 months remotely. That's fascinating. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
No, but this is a memory. This is like 5 years ago. I didn't even remember this. I wasn't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's like 4 years ago. It's like, wow.
Yeah, and it's like different people approach things differently, and depending on like where they were, and like I was from perspective of like I went into very like, and then so when I think about this, it's kind of like this is like midlife crisis for me.
Yeah.
This is like me at a particular place in terms of like job, life, relationship, family, all of this shit, all of this stuff is happening, and it's kind of like, it was this thing of like, we're not going to lose another parent. And this is about more than just me saying me, it's not siblings. I don't have siblings, but it was just like in relationship to my partner, in relationship to, and so like, I was like, I basically put my mother in seclusion, you know what I mean? Like, cause it was just kind of like, and people's fucking grandparents that I knew were dying, and fucking aunt dying, all this, crazy shit. And I was very much of like, no, like this is fucking, I'm going to take time off of work. I'm going to figure this shit out. I'm going to come back with a mask. I'm going to fucking like, there's a reason why masks and condoms and seatbelts and shit like that work. And so, and then we can figure out what to do as we go along and see if this follows kind of like the trajectory of contagion. Like ultimately, they're going to develop a vaccine and see where we go from there. And so it was a lot of navigating, and in that it was kind of like, because of other things that were happening, plus the pandemic, it was kind of like I lost touch with of my friends for a period of time. And then it would be like, okay, like if you're gonna hang out, then it's like, okay, well, let's hang out outside type of thing, and then it was like, okay, well, now we have tests. So testing became like another tool, and it was, and then it's like, okay, we're doing this on the phone. So from there we went Train to Busan.
Mm-hmm.
You did an episode on 10 films to get you through these hard times.
I don't even remember what those films are. I would love
You
to
do
go
or
back
you do
into
not?
it. I don't. Used Cars is probably one of them. Hard Times might have been one of them. I don't know. I can't even remember. I don't even remember doing that episode.
One listener recently, you know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
We're still going to dedicate you. Everyone who donates to us, we're going to dedicate episode 2. Don't worry. We have everything marked. Said like recently commented that like this show helped him get through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck, like this show helped us get through the pandemic. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, sure.
And the following episode 265 was Return of the Living Dead. We just kind of stayed on that. Like, it's like, let's just go fucking real weird and we're real dark.
Mm-hmm.
And help like kind of go, because I was not of the perspective of, I didn't feel that I had the luxury to be one of those people that was like, you know what I mean? Like, whatever.
Yeah,
like,
throw caution to the wind and say, fuck it, I'm going to live my life, baby.
To the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like...
I'm going to LIVIN, baby. I don't give a fuck.
That's right. That's right. These pandemics, I get older and these pandemics stay the same age. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that. It was like, it was just kind of like, no. Now it's like fucking, I am mortal. I am broke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people around me are getting older, as am I, and like, I need to fucking like be responsible, not only for my own safety, but for the safety of those around me. Even if maybe some of them are younger than me, but still, you know what I mean? Like, and at a place where it's kind of like. And that's also, I mean, I don't usually come from that necessarily perspective. I do to a certain extent, but I'm not someone that you would really call like, I'm more individualistic. And I was like, no, this is not an every man for himself type of thing. This is like, let's have some consideration. And so you and I we didn't,
we didn't see each other, you know?
We didn't see each other.
Yeah, there needs to be a compromise. It's like life and death type situation, and at that time it was life and death. People will downplay it today, and Bill Maher will get on his show and say what we did wrong and keeping kids out of the school. But I don't know, man. I don't think maybe we overreacted, but sometimes it's important to overreact rather than to underreact and let shit get out of control.
Yeah, I mean, it was different states got to play their little experiments with how it would work. But the thing is that not all things were equal. So like, it's not a real way to judge it because the conditions in LA were not the same as the conditions in Florida.
Yeah.
Because the travel rates and whatever, all this other shit is happening. And so like the next time, we could look back at what we did this time and we could do the exact opposite and still not supposedly get it right because there is no right. It's kind of like you're just figuring it out. And
it's all fucking guesswork. And sometimes you're going to guess right and sometimes you're going to guess incorrectly. It's, you know.
Because it's an ongoing situation, the messaging kept changing.
Yeah, it did.
And the messaging, I think, was not always the best in terms of like how to market this, basically, how to sell it. And so with the way it was polarized, it was easy to turn into a Rashomon thing, where it was like, yeah, this is what it was. No, that's what it was. And that's where we're at. And so through this, we kept moving. We did The Hidden, this little known, little sci-fi funky film. We did.
That was one of my happiest moments when I was like, wow, you've never heard of this film? You have no idea what this is?
You had shown me the trailer before,
Yeah.
and we watched the trailer at your house. But finally, it was like, all right, we're going to do this. We did the Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Mm-hmm. We did kind of like some underground cult classic kind of films, yeah.
Yeah, we did 268. We did Looper.
Fun.
We did RoboCop.
Yeah.
So we did the original and the 2014. We did The Warriors to episode 270. We compared and contrasted Park Chan-wook's Old Boy with Spike Lee's Old Boy, episode 271.
And I think we gave Spike Lee's Old Boy a lot. We gave it a much better review than a lot of people had given to it. We liked it a lot more than its reputation, while at the same time acknowledging, he did some interesting stuff, while at the same time acknowledging it's not better than Park Chan-wook's film.
Of course,
there's no way, Yeah.
We did Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, a Peckinpah film.
Have we done that twice now? Because I feel like we did it here as well. We did it.
No.
Because I love that movie. I think that's a fucking incredible movie that more people. It's not for everybody. That's one of those things we were talking off mic about recommending things to people. That's one that I can't recommend that to people. I can recommend it on this podcast for people who are open-minded and want to see new films. But if I recommended Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia to someone, that's on the list. Bring Me the Head, Bad Lieutenant, A Woman Under the Influence. These are all movies that would probably end friendships. I don't think a lot of people can really. I don't think that they can embrace these types of films.
Turin Horse. And friendships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's divisive fucking films. We did.
We got into LA at this point.
We got into LA, and we did. So we looked at the riots, and it was kind of like, well, the Watts riots of 65, the LA riots of 92, and then
uprisings. Which one did we decide on?
I mean, it's fucking Rashomon. It's like, well, what are we talking about? You know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about? With the George Floyd, all that stuff, it's like, okay, pandemic, but then you have all this, like, then it's like, well, there's a pandemic of fucking African American men being killed by cops, right? And that's another one where it's kind of like, well, the perspective is like, oh yeah, that's bullshit, fake news. Or on the other hand, it's kind of like when the looting starts, the shooting starts, which is another thing that.
Or something like, do you really need a TV? Do you really need a TV? That's what you're stealing. Well, you're not too happy when they're stealing baby formula and diapers either, so I'm just,
right. And downtown LA was fucking, and like.
Well, what was really interesting to me about that was, and I had left. You remember, I had, at this point, this is June of 2020. I was gone May. So, 65, your mom had a perspective of that, correct?
Yeah, she was in LA.
So your mom, 65, you spoke to her about that. 92, you were in LA. 2020,
sure was.
You were in LA. So what was it? What did we decide? Every 30 some odd years? Or close to every 27 to 30 years, LA burns. Didn't we say that? 27 to 28 years. Oh shit,
It
27
was
years have
just
gone
weird.
by. Yeah.
It was just weird to see that. Yeah, to look at it like that, and to revisit those events, and and it's for the same reasons.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this was this, that was that, and that was that. It was like, okay, fucking watch the footage, watch riots. You see the batons, you see the
Mm-hmm.
watch the LA riots. You know, fucking it starts with Rodney King
Yeah.
video.
It's
Um,
everything old is new and everything is new is old, and it's like I remember Paul Mooney talking about this at the Comedy Store where he said, um, I wrote a movie because he was talking about how Hollywood doesn't make black movies, and he was like, I wrote a movie, Rip Van Nigger. It's about a nigger that goes to sleep for 100 years and he wakes up, nothing has changed. And I'm just fucking dying. But it was Mooney, and it was just like God damn, there are voices that speak to it, and the Watts uprising, the Rodney King trials, and then 2020 Black Lives Matter, and you're just sitting there like, holy fuck, how the fuck? Maybe two, but a third one? How is this still a fucking problem on the level that it is a problem? Um, it boggles the mind.
I mean, like the fucking stores stayed open for the pandemic. Shit was like
Mm-hmm.
there, and it was like, but then to drive through downtown in the days around this, it was like fucking shit was boarded up.
Yeah.
It was crazy, and to see there's a Starbucks around the corner from where I had done a show. I had directed a small show, and then
Mm-hmm.
down the street from where we had done work, a separate space.
Mm-hmm.
And that Starbucks was just fucking torn apart, and it was different than watching shit burn in '92, because it felt like '92 was just so much more widespread, and you could smell like there were like bits of like there was ash in the air in '92, and it seemed like it was more far reaching in '92, and it got like rather close to where I was at the time, and and to see it move through different communities and move north, towards more like white areas,
Yeah.
this was this was more like pockets, and it was more downtown. And I mean, then it was stuff was happening around the country, but it was different. It wasn't the same. Um, and then to go back and look at documentaries, LA '92, LA Burning, Dark Blue, Ron Shelton's film,
Yeah.
with Kurt Russell.
One of the great
And
underseen films, and a very brave film that tackles a lot of really difficult subjects concerning that time.
yeah, and we did that. We did Spike Lee's The Five Bloods,
Mm-hmm.
where he does some stuff that he had done with Old Boy. He uses kind of those techniques, and so now so we're looking at that, and to have, one of those characters is there are all these Vietnam vets, and one of them is a fucking Trump supporter, and it being Rames, and it's just like not being Rames, I'm sorry,
Delroy Lindo.
Delroy Lindo,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going like, what the fuck? Like this is where we're at, and we followed that with John Carpenter's Escape from LA and Escape from New York and Escape from LA,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just it was a crazy kind of place to go from starting. The last episode we ended on fucking Ebert, and then we did uh, autofocus, and then we got into perspective, and it was kind of like that was kind of the theme, and it was all these films, very very cinema classic Criterion collection type of stuff, and then to be affected by the times and to have, this isn't something that it was like, oh, this is going on in my life or your life or art or separately, but both of our lives somehow. Or no, this is everybody who's listening to this episode, who will listen to this episode, is going to be able to say, oh, this is what happened in my life, or this is who died,
Yeah.
or like that listener who was like, no, this got me through it. And in the same way we were all fucking dealing with, in this country at least, we were all dealing with, and abroad too, like the pandemic obviously, but I'm talking about the George Floyd stuff, like that stuff spread too. And with that, this idea of like the Delroy Lindo and his fucking MAGA hat, and that's those kind of right movements that are spreading throughout the world. And then it's kind of like why did we choose zombies? And it's like, oh, it's just a simple kind of contagion thing, and then you turn into that thing and it fucks you up? Or is it just is it more ideology? Is it more any of this stuff that gets out of control, that's beyond what one person can do? This overwhelming shit that we find ourselves in, and that we found ourselves in 2020. And you hadn't even done, like, there, you will get there. But this idea of fucking escape from New York, escape from LA, like escape from where? Like where the fuck, depending on where you are, where can you fucking go?
Well, that's the thing, not escape from, escape to. Where the fuck are we escaping to? Yeah, yeah.
Right. And even the idea of like going home, working from home, trying to work from home if you can, because not everyone has that luxury. And then like going to podcasts on a wider level, or going to, watching movies at home, because fucking you're not trying to go to a theater unless you're in Orange County here in California, where it's like, God, fuck the pandemic, like that's some liberal bullshit, like I do what I want, fuck grandma, you know what I mean? Like, so there's that. And the fact that like since then and stuff has returned, like podcasts and audience like engagement with podcasts in general has declined. Because people are fucking like doing other things. The effect that it had on the economy. All of this shit that's still like, we're still feeling the reverberations of that. And just in seeing our numbers, from pandemic levels to now, we could do the same movie. We could redo something that we've done before. Or forget redo, pretend that like it's two separate worlds or whatever. You could have during COVID world where you do Jurassic Park, let's say, and the numbers would have been so much more than what we just did with Jurassic Park. So even like, obviously this affected the material that we were looking at. It affects our mindset in doing this program, but it also affects like the listener. It affects the process of podcasting and the engagement with the podcast itself. One of the benefits, I think, of doing it on the phone is, I think, on a certain level, I don't know if this translates to the listener, I don't know, and it's not like we're super trying to, I think we'd rather do it. I don't know if it equals that, but I think we're more interested in like authenticity and in the content than in necessarily like, oh, we have this amazing audio. Obviously, audio has not ever been something that we're like, oh, if you have the best equipment, you have the best podcast.
Yeah.
It's like the best conversation is the best podcast. The thing is that I do feel from the perspective of doing it, I feel that, and even though we still do cut each other off a lot, and we'll get fucking text messages and alerts and whatever the fuck else, and I know it pisses people off. If we forget to push that button or whatever the fuck it is, I do feel that there's a different level of listening than we had before.
No, it's definitely a different concentration and a different it's a different muscle that you have to work.
And I mean, and I do enjoy, like, I'm here surrounded by my bullshit. I'm here surrounded by my collages and my books and my candles and my wine and my black painted walls and my blackout curtain. And it's not, in my mind, every time we record, and I would like it to be that, and I'm going to reveal that it's not, but in my mind, and I want it to be for the listener, that every time they hear us, they imagine it's late as fuck in the night.
Yeah.
And the behind the scenes is that we're recording right now in the afternoon. So the reality is that it's in the afternoon. It doesn't seem like that to me because the curtains are fucking like closed, the lights are on, the candles are burning, and as far as I'm concerned, it's nighttime.
Yeah.
When we record, it's fucking nighttime. And with all of this shit that we were going through and that we were covering in this episode, and we're going to continue to cover because we're just barely a little bit over half of this journey, of the way through this fucking journey of remembering. It's like finding fucking that supposedly, the dawn through the dark night of the soul. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're fucking going through. And having, like, looking back at these episodes, like, these were fucking fun. These episodes were cool to do. Dirty little fucking films. Return of the Living Dead, Escape from New York. Dirty little fun, gritty films. And we started out the year with great fucking cinema, and we ended up with some dirty ass little fucking movies. Obviously we're in June at this point of 2020, but we're ready to wrap up this episode, to this one particularly today, with this Escape. But it's like exactly what you said. It's like not only from, but like to what? What does that mean, like, for podcasting? What does that mean for cinema itself, in the way that it not only reflects the times, defines them, interacts with them, but also, like, what does it do for us psychologically in terms of, like, a place to return to, especially in light of what you say with Star Wars. It's like things are changing, including the way fucking the pandemic itself changed cinema, and Christopher Nolan and these people have tried to revive it on some level, and that hasn't necessarily worked. It's like, well, we're bringing the cinema literally into the home versus finding our home in the movie theater. But it's like, well, regardless, it's kind of like cinema is like where the heart is, type of shit. And obviously the pandemic did not kill the podcast. So even if podcasting as an art form is supposedly dead, with the exception of the biggies at the top, it may not be dead, but we are the zombies that continue to fucking to move through this podcast world of cinema, and we intend to continue to do that.
There ain't no stopping us. Just keep moving forward.
buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. Thank you for your recent generous contributions. We will dedicate episodes to all of you. Right now, this is dedicated to all the listeners. If this helped you for whatever during the pandemic and beyond, we're glad that we could talk to you in those times. We couldn't sit with you, but we could talk to you. We could talk to each other. It helped you get through it. It helped us too. Stay tuned.
That it did. Take care, all.